Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Entrepreneurship Lab. This is your host, Nevena Bajalac, welcoming you once again. And I'm very excited because today I have a special guest with a lot of experience, and he's coming all the way from US, San Francisco, beautiful San Francisco. His name is Kevin Surace, and Kevin is a serial entrepreneur. He's a pioneer in technology, and he have been founded and established a lot of companies over the years. And today he's going to share his experience and his story with us. And also, we're going to talk specifically about artificial intelligence that everyone are talking about and how this can support your business or how it's going to change the future of business. So, Kevin, welcome to the show. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Absolutely. So happy to be here with you.
Pleasure is all mine. So, Kevin, before we start with the questions, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself. I read your bio, it's so impressive, but I want to tell us your journey and all the impact you had on business, different companies you built. So, share a little bit with all the listeners.
Sure, absolutely. Look, I think I was probably born to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone is born to be an entrepreneur. I will tell you, it's a question often asked of me,
Yes.
and I say that because you actually have to be willing to fail, okay to fail, and get up again and do it again. Because entrepreneurship isn't about winning every time. There is no winning every time. I mean, yes, Mark Zuckerberg won his first time, and he just stayed with that lane, right? But most people do not win every time. And statistically, you're going to lose a lot of the time. But you got to get back up. You've got great ideas, and you want to go solve problems. Now, my journey in entrepreneurship is always finding a pain point, and then, in my case, finding technology or something that can solve that pain point. I am not a big believer in creating a product that's looking for a market. And we tend to do that a lot in our startups, whether tech startup or some other startup. we don't know if the need is there, but we come up with this great solution, and it's a solution looking for a problem. And you go out there and people say, well, I don't have that problem. Well, you do, you just don't know it. No, I don't have that problem. And so I always encourage entrepreneurs, do not create a solution looking for a problem. Find a problem. There are problems throughout your life. There's amazing problems, like all over the place. You could automate things, you can solve problems. So when you go through my career and you look at all of the companies I've had and the successful exits or dead exits or whatever they were, it was really about solving problems. And I've got a little shy of 100 patents worldwide now. Every single one is I've solved a problem that no one else solved, right? So so I started. I came out to Silicon Valley. It's a great place to start companies. And I started in large companies and then learned enough about all of the processes of building a company. Then I joined a small company to learn about everything in a small company, from finance to marketing to manufacturing, whatever it was. And only after that did I go start a company. So a lot of people start companies right out of school. The problem with that is you've never actually been in a company to see how they work. And so I encourage people to go work in a large company for a while, see how painful all the red tape is, then go work in a small company and see how a very small company with 10 or 20 or 30 people really works, right? All the pieces. And then you've probably, between school and those two experiences, you probably really have a sense now of, oh, that's accounting. Oh, that's marketing. Oh, that's sales. Oh, that, and you don't learn all of that in school. So I think you really need some experience. So I strongly encourage experience, and then go find real problems, right? And so my very first company was called AirCommunications. We invented the cellular data phone. This is in 1992. It's a little bit ahead of schedule, but believe it or not, we had a real company with millions of dollars of sales. And there was a need for this by what we used to call a road warrior, someone who was on the road all the time, salespeople and executives, and they would need to communicate. Now, this was an expensive, $2,000, smartphone that had a very small screen and very limited capabilities. But in those days, it could actually get a fax, literally a fax, like a fax machine was built into the thing, right? So it was for road warriors, and if you wanted a larger screen, you'd plug it into your laptop and use that as the screen, right? So it sort of needed that communication. But for the first time, you could connect in and get email, or go to, at the time, BBSs, or go to what was soon to become the internet by 1995. And you could do that sitting in an airport. And I remember the first time I was sitting in an airport, probably 92 or 93, with an AirCommunicator. And I've got the weather up. I'm going to Boston and I'm in San Francisco. I got the weather, and people walked over and said, "How do you have the weather in Boston on your computer?" There is no Wi-Fi at the time. There is no communication, right? So I'm communicating with a thing and an antenna here, and people were blown away. Now today we take wireless communication for granted, but there was none then, right? So we were using the cell network to send and receive data. So, that solved a problem for road warriors, was that I'm completely out of communication, and the only time I get any communication is to make a call back to my office and ask an assistant, for example, what do I need to do? So anyway, I parlayed that, and I did more in mobile, and invented the first virtual assistant called Portico, MyTalk, Magic Talk, Mary. Eventually became the General Motors OnStar system. We built that at General Magic. And this was the first AI-based virtual assistant. So this is the late 90s. And again, people were just blown away. It actually did more than Siri does today. It could not only get your email and read your email, Mary would answer your phone for you and say, "Hi, this is Mary. I'm answering Kevin's phone." There'd be an interaction there. And you'd say, "I'd like to book an appointment with Kevin. I'm sorry, I don't recognize your number. I don't recognize who you are, but I'll note that and let him decide." But if she recognized who they were, then she would go ahead and book them. This is the late 90s. Okay. So we are really talking about 25 years ago. So we invented all of that. It was dozens of patents, and that became the basis. And those patents got licensed for Siri and Google Assistant and Alexa and everything else, right? So it's the basis of all of our virtual assistants today. I continued on and did building management systems, which is really interesting. And I got to retrofit the Empire State Building, the New York Stock Exchange, 70,000 other projects with soundproof drywall, and interestingly enough, an energy saving software that would manage the building in new ways. That has gone on to sell billions. Those products are in the billions of dollars today. And continued on and on and on. And today I work on a number of things: cybersecurity and AI, generative AI for finding bugs in software, which is a very, very complicated thing. It's very complex, and I like the complexity. Is it a problem? Yes. We cannot find all the bugs in our software, and we really need AI to find those bugs for us. That's the right answer to this problem, rather than hire 100 more people and hopefully manually or some other way they'll find bugs. So lots of things. And cybersecurity, of course, has become a bigger problem with AI, because AI is writing now phishing emails that are so good you can't tell they're phishing. I don't know if you know what MFA is, multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, yes, codes on your phone and things like this. They've all been hacked. They're easy to hack. Ransomware people can get your MFA code very easily, either through a social hack, social engineering, or directly in ways that I won't describe, because then I'd give away the secrets. But so people think they're safe, and companies think they're safe, and they've just rolled out 2FA. All 2FA has been hacked for 5 years. So this is not any protection really at all. So we invented a ring called the token ring. You can look it up at tokenring.com. And it's a cybersecurity ring. And when you wear that, it's for enterprises. When you wear that ring, it's tied to your finger, and it only works on your finger forever, basically in perpetuity. And so it doesn't work for anyone else. It's tied to your finger. You can take the ring off. It won't work for anyone else. You lose the ring. It doesn't work for anyone else. It only works for you and identifies you to your applications, and your applications will not open for anyone else. So that means, ransomware people in Russia cannot get into your applications. They're going to go somewhere else, because it comes up and says, "Do you have your token ring?" And they go, "I don't know what a token ring is. Let me go somewhere else and hack that other hospital," right? So anyway, that's a little journey. I could tell you lots more. Yes. Talk about success rates and how you raise money, and we could just talk forever.
Forever, yes. But I know you have a limited time, but this is really impressive. And I'm born in 1990 and in Serbia, and I remember dial-up internet still and
Yes.
no YouTube. But I know the new generations, we cannot even imagine the world without internet now. And internet is gone or electricity, everything stops. And you're so ahead of the time, even now with the talking ring, right? And back then, so I'm assuming we're gonna jump into talking about artificial intelligence, which is a
Yeah.
big thing now in the world. And we're still like, oh, this is something in the future, which is not true. But a lot of people are scared, a lot of people don't understand it. And I think the same way people couldn't understand internet, and we still don't understand it, but we use it. I think the same way artificial intelligence is becoming part of our lives. So can you tell us a little bit more about how is artificial intelligence actually impacting today? How is specifically affecting businesses? You mentioned a couple
Sure.
of things, but yeah.
Sure. So look, AI, first of all, AI has been in our lives in one way or another for almost 70 years. And it's been used in better understanding data for corporations and enterprises for decades. But it's machine learning and AI. I'm going to combine them for this talk, for this conversation. Has been getting more interesting and more powerful because the algorithms that we've developed are now capable of running with the very large cloud systems that we've developed, right? So part of the problem, if you went back, 20 years ago, we knew what a neural net was. We've known what a neural net, we knew how to build a neural net for a very long time. It's just very deep neural nets would have taken years to run. And that's impractical, right? That's not a practical thing. So with the advent of cloud computing, where I can rent time, I can now rent enough time to create a model that's very deep and very broad, and I don't have to build that infrastructure myself. And because of that, that has allowed us to invent and come up with better algorithms. So if you go back a decade or two, of course, I mean, we were using AI, we were using hidden Markov models back in the late 90s for speech recognition. We used it in Portico, My Talk, Magic Talk, General Motors OnStar. So we were doing that kind of work then, except we were very limited in the machine learning algorithms we could use at the time because we didn't have that much horsepower, right? And we had to build our own operations center. Like there was no one to go rent something. You built it. Well, today, our algorithms are 100,000 times better and faster, because hardware comes along at the rate of, doubling its capability every 18 months, give or take, right? Based on Moore's law. And that has continued to happen. And so today, 100,000 times more powerful, we can do a lot more. So, of course, interactions that are human-like, like ChatGPT, are really amazing. And they're scaring people. And they're very scary. And you got people out there like Alon, who I know, saying, "Oh, it's the end of the world." Okay, let's set the record straight. AI is not the end of any world. Unless you connect ChatGPT to the nuclear arsenal, it is not the end of the world. All right, so everybody get that off of their plate. Here, I want to give you an example. In the 70s, long before you were even thought of in anyone's mind, the electronic calculator showed up. Electronic calculator. And in the mid to late 80s, we had spreadsheets, first Lotus 1, 2, 3, and then Excel. Okay. When the calculator came about, all of a sudden on your desk, you could calculate and do long division at a level that would take you personally 30 minutes to solve, and it could solve it in less than a second. That was miraculous. It was going to put people out of work. It was unbelievable. You couldn't imagine a simple electronic calculator. I don't even use anymore, right? And then when Excel came, it took all of these very complex financial calculations, and what did it do? It made them work right on your desktop, where we used to have hundreds of people adding up columns and rows for finance, right? In these ledger books, literally ledger books, page by page by page. It's how you ran companies. And all of a sudden, this worked automatically. In the smallest company, the largest company, for a $99 software package, you could basically automate all of your finance team. Unbelievable. Like game changing in math. And what I want to tell people is by the late 80s, and certainly early 90s, we solved math. Like math was now a solved problem. Before that, it was not. For most of us, if we had to divide two numbers or come up with a square root of something, we literally had to do it with a pencil until that time, literally with a pencil. And all of a sudden, we were made 1,000 times more productive in that one task, right? Literally. We went from an hour to a second. Unbelievable. Okay. Now, language is much harder than math, and it's much more fluid. And it's taken us an extra 30 or 40 or 50 years, 30 or 40, 50 years to get to where we have language models that start to be useful to us. We've had language models for a long time, but they weren't very good. So we've had, I mean, in Portico, we had a rules-based language model, and it was quite good. You could ask her literally millions of things and she would answer, right? But it was a rules-based engine with limited sort of AI responses. We had some weightings and things like that, but it's the way we could do it that in those days. Today, we can train a model on 1 trillion phrases, trillion. And so when you ask the model a question, it has a reasonable response, which is fascinating. And it's fascinating to people. But all we've done with a large language model is what we did for math 40, 50, 30, 40, 50 years ago. We solved math, and now we're solving for language as a tool. The calculator is a tool. Excel is a tool, right? We still need humans to run. This is a tool. It helps us write. It helps us give us ideas. It's not always right because it's a language model. It read fiction. It thinks fiction is fact. It doesn't know the difference, right? So it's really fascinating. And when you look at it as yet another tool, but now we have a language tool. And for a long time, we didn't have a language tool. Maybe we had Grammarly help us with our grammar, but now we have a language tool. That's fascinating. And we are going to look at this 3 or 4 years from now, just as we looked at the calculator in Excel. It's just a tool. We have it in our toolkit. We all use it. It makes us 3, 5, 10 times, 100 times more productive on that one task.
Yes, and it's not going to be end of the world, so everyone can
Don't
relax.
hook it to the nuclear arsenal.
Okay, so can you tell us how can entrepreneurs, this is a podcast for entrepreneurs, a lot of startups in my network, and medium-sized companies, but even big companies, how can they benefit from artificial intelligence?
Sure.
How can they start use it? Are there any programs you're recommending? And yeah, share with us a little bit your experience.
Well, look, right now there are about 1,000 startups a week in the US using generative AI in some way. There aren't 1,000 problems to solve, by the way. So most of those 1,000 will not make it. It might be one a week is going to make it, right? The rest are junk. But even though they're doing wonderful work, it's probably a feature, not a company. So look, the very first place that you can easily use this generative AI, there's 2 areas. So one is with Microsoft Copilot. It uses now GPT-4 as a backend, and that allows you to code faster. In fact, the data over the last 6 months shows programmers using Copilot are 55% more productive. They're not 100 times more productive. They're 55% more productive. That's almost double the productivity. That means one coder is now worth 2 coders. That means I'm amplifying the brain power of that coder. I've doubled the brain power of that coder. So I like to call AI like, amplified intelligence, right? Amplified intelligence, because that's really what it is. Now, we still need them to say, here's what I want to code. In fact, they start writing their code and Copilot will just write the rest of it for them. Now, the truth is, a lot of the code doesn't run that's given to you by Copilot. It might not be correct. It probably has errors, but coding like writing, you get mental blocks. You got to solve this problem. You don't even know what to write next, and you're just stuck and you can't think of the logic. So it's giving you some ideas as an assistant next to you, as a really smart assistant, right? That's very powerful. And we know it makes coders 55% more productive. Let's look at marketing. Okay. If I want to write a blurb about your podcast, the first thing I might want to do is get some of these podcasts into text so that I can feed it to a large language model like ChatGPT or another one or Bard or whatever. And I would feed some of them and say, please write a 200-word summary on the power of my podcast. What it writes will be beyond what either of us could have written. Its prose, its sentence structure is unbelievably good because it's read trillions of them, right? Now, you're still going to go edit that and go, well, that's not how I position that. And I think I'd use a different word here. And it turns out we want to edit what comes out. And it turns us into editors and robot overlords rather than writers. But for you to write it, first of all, you're too close to the subject. You're likely to not write something from an outside perspective. You can't because you're not outside. You probably couldn't write it as fast as it can because it'll write it in like 3 seconds. So this is a very powerful tool. So if I asked you to sit there and say, hey, let's do some long division, you'd go, why? I have a tool that does that for me. Trust me, within the year, you're going to say, if I said, write a blog post about your podcast, you go, why would I do that? I have a tool that does that for me, right? So you're still going to edit it because it's not math, but this is really, really powerful. And that's the second thing. So marketing, if you want to create ads that have potentially the best marketing pull, it's great at writing those ads. And it's looked at all of the ads that it could find over the years of training it had, and it probably knows what gets better clicks and what has better selling appeal and things like that, right? You'll still probably edit them. You'll be thoughtful about them. You'll have to place them, but doesn't matter. So all of these are powerful, even for small companies. You have to advertise. You need social media. You need to write blog posts. And blog posts are a pain because, you really want to put out one a day if you could, but you just don't have time to write one a day. But ChatGPT will write one a day for you, and you're going to edit it, and it takes a 2-hour task down to 10 minutes of editing. Incredibly powerful. Okay, customer support. If you train the model and you put some rules around it, it is better at customer support than your humans are. And it can be trained to be more accurate. Sales, as long as it's incoming calls, it's probably better at taking the incoming call and possibly better at closing a sale than your people might be that need lots and lots of training, right? So these are areas you can easily use this technology and easily improve the outcome for your company and easily drive your costs down, right? Yes. Because the other thing is hiring is expensive and it's hard. There's not enough people to do the jobs anywhere in the world today, almost. And so this is great if I've got a machine doing this, and I may have an overseer of that machine over 2 or 3 areas, but I might not need 10 people. Maybe I need 2. And by the way, I couldn't hire 10. 1, I can't afford them, and 2, I can't find them.
Amazing. And I use the ChatGPT a lot, and I use it for book editing, for ideas the other day with my client to find names for her company, and right. It's just brilliant how much generate. But I have a question that people raise, and I'm not expert in this area, especially when it comes to marketing. Do you think that ads and paid marketing in Google will start recognizing what's written by artificial intelligence? Will it start sorting it, or no?
No. It's there are various companies that have started to try to say, oh, I think this was written by AI. But it turns out it's very, very hard to do that. And there's lots of problems in this space. But the bottom line is, for the most part right now, it is hard for ChatGPT, for example, or any transformer to recognize that something was written by another transformer. It's very difficult to do, and it may be impossible. And of course, a number of companies started up to try to catch this stuff for teachers in college, right? I'm going to tell you that and it turns out it's not very accurate. It may be only accurate 70 or 80% of the time, which means you got false positives and false negatives, which means you're now accusing students of using GPT and they go, but I didn't. And you're telling some other one they clearly didn't use GPT, but they did. And so this gets down to prompt engineering and being thoughtful about your prompts. And it also gets down to how much editing they did and stuff like that. But look, students in college have had the internet for a very long time. Okay, they've been using a variety of services from Chegg to Wikipedia to help them write their papers. This is not new. All GPT did was make it a little bit faster and a little bit more convenient. But in the end, you're an editor, right? You're not thinking up these thoughts for most of these students. If you want students to think up thoughts on their own, then everybody close their notebook, take out a pencil, and write on paper in the classroom your thoughts on the following subject. That's the only way you're going to do it. And by the way, that's how we do it with SATs or these kinds of standardized tests. Is there is no computer, there may be no calculator, there's a pencil and paper, and you start doing it, that's how you isolate. You have to air gap them from the internet. But on the other hand, one other thing, what we have to do is train our students today to be great editors of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
That's actually going to be far more important than knowing how to write from scratch. Just like, for the most part in school today, calculators are accepted, past, I don't know, third or fourth grade, maybe fifth grade. And the reason for that is that people have to know how to use calculators in Excel. They don't really need to know how to do long division. They will never do long division in their life.
Yes.
Ever. So we'll teach you once in fifth grade, and then you'll never do it again. Or we're at fourth grade, whatever it is in different countries. You never do it again. Why? You'll never do it again. Why would you ever calculate the square root of some crazy number when there's a machine that does it in a split second? You wouldn't. So we need to teach students the skills of today. Skills of today are use our tools, calculators, Excel spreadsheets, coding, what else? ChatGPT and large language models. It's just a tool.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I want to ask one last question specific about ChatGPT, and when it comes to copywriting and repeating the same material. I know there are like thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of information, but if we try and we say, I want to write a blog about, I don't know, about social media, and then after 1 hour I go again, I said, write me a blog about social media. How is there like unlimited ways, or it's going to generate a new article every time? How is this coded in general?
Oh, well, it's a great question. So ChatGPT and all these transformer models are nothing more than a very large neural net, huge neural net. Okay, and a neural net is simply a set of hidden decision points with weighted neurons. Okay, so just weightings. So every time it writes a word based on what you've asked it to do, it then goes and says, what should the next word be based on everything I've learned? Does that make sense? And it weights those and it says, well, this is the one that I'm going to choose. And then this is the one. And that's based on sentence structure, and it's based on what it is it's trying to tell you. There is some randomness built into most of these, so that if you ask it the same question 3 times, it will randomly give you, some slightly other weighting. So it won't keep choosing exactly the same words come back. But probably they're going to be similar. They also recognize when you're right in a row, right? So it recognizes it gave you this before. It's not going to give it to you again. So there's this context. Context has been built into most of the large language models today. So they've got context that I'm working with you. I already gave you that answer. Let me give you a slightly different one this time, right? So there's thought about, just like a human would, right? That's very easy to sort of program in. But in the end, these are math models, by the way. You notice it isn't, the creation of this kind of neural net is not taught in science, physics, chemistry, or language, or history. It's taught in the math department because it's actually a math model. It's a mathematical model represented in code to build a very large neural net, very, very large neural net that can go and be trained on trillions of things and then respond back. But there is concern about one thing. As we generate more and more internet content that is generated by these transformers, what happens is it's going to skew the internet towards a central response. Okay, so whatever that more centralized response is, because those are the ones that typically score higher, and so those are getting put out there. Now, as we retrain these models going forward, we're training it on its same output. And what happens is we're going to take the breadth of human output that is this big bell curve, and the edges here are going to get less and less likely to ever come up because the center is getting more and more and more large. Does that make sense? So we are at risk, and probably will corrupt our models by training them on its own data over and over and over again. And 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when 99% of the text on the internet was written by, or even pictures, right, was written or created by these large language models, you have a problem, because we're dumbing down the model, right? We're not giving it the breadth of human edges, right? The edge cases. We're just giving it more and more and more and more and more of this, and then those are always going to score higher, and then it's a feedback loop that gets worse and worse. And so we are in danger of that, of creating models that can't think, they don't think anyway, but can't represent outcomes way outside that center box.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. I would like to wrap up this episode. I want to go back, make the full circle of something you said, which I love, that entrepreneurs should focus on the problem. And I always tell my clients as a consultant, all marketing you're doing, first session, first meeting, I tell them, write me all the problems your client have. And they're like, what? I'm like, yes, emotionally, financially, whatever. What are you actually solving with your service or your product? Because all marketing should focus, this is the problem, this is the solution we're providing. So
Right.
to wrap that up, and I love that it came from you as well with so much experience, what is one final advice you would tell entrepreneurs? Because I'm seeing them same like you, starting and launching programs and technology. So many people I work with, and they're like, they want to create the best software or new software, and I'm like, no, you have to really use like the unutilized problem or unutilized opportunity and go in there. So what is something from your experience that will help entrepreneurs be more successful?
Yeah. Job one is wake up in the morning and find a pain point that nobody has solved. That is your job. Your job isn't to start a company. Your job is to find a pain point. Then you find a pain point, then you can get a group of people around and say, can I find that? Can I solve that pain point? Dumbest example in the world. There's Kleenex for blowing your nose when you have the sniffles or you clog nose or whatever. The pain point there is not how do I make a better Kleenex or a different Kleenex. The pain point is that I have a stuffy nose. So now what are the possible solutions for a stuffy nose? I can have Kleenex, sure. I can have medications, sure. Maybe I can have a big snot sucking machine that I put up there, excuse the language, that sucks the nose up. There are lots of solutions to that pain point, but the pain point is I have a stuffy nose, right? Or the pain point is, I'll give you an example. Another example is a lot of pain point today is the pain point in landscaping is I can't grow my company because I can't hire enough people to do the work. Okay, very interesting, right? So that's a problem around the world. It's not ever another pain point, big one in Japan right now. We don't have enough people to care for the elderly and nobody wants the job. Oh, that's an actual pain point that people will put money towards, right? So it's got to be a pain point. It's got to be also, there's got to be someone who wants to write a check for that, right? So look, there's an opportunity to create better robots and characters and interfaces for old people in Japan who want to tell the same story over and over and over again. And no human wants to listen to that story every day, but they will. A robot will listen to it every day, right? So I'm just giving you examples of pain points. I can think of hundreds. Find the pain point, then come around and find a solution and then find the market for it. Don't wake up and say, I got this great idea. I'm going to create, trees from plastic. Really? Is that a pain point? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I know I'm going to use generative AI to automatically create a podcast. Okay, maybe I didn't know is there a pain point of not enough people creating podcasts? I don't think so. I don't think that's a pain point today. We got plenty of podcasts, 100,000 or something, right? So yours is the best one, but you know my point, right? So maybe that's not a pain point. It's interesting. It's probably not a pain point, right? Yeah. So let's step back and say, okay, Hollywood on strike. Very big, controversial topic, right? Is there a pain point where we don't have enough writers, let's say? No, we have plenty of writers. We have lots and lots of writers. But the cost of a writing room is high. So the pain point to a studio is I can pay 8 writers for, 22 weeks, a lot of money to write this show, or possibly I could pay 1 writer to edit a large language model output, a GPT output. So that, sort of writing scripts is an actual financial pain point across an industry. I'm not saying that's good for writers. I'm not saying, they got to work that out, right? But AI is here to stay. Someone's solving that pain point, right? They are solving it because there is a pain point. And the writers you have to figure that out and find a way to participate in it. Right now they're saying no AI can be used in writing scripts. Okay, that's like saying you cannot stream music. Okay, the music companies tried that, 20 years ago. It turns out that didn't work. Why? because people were going to stream music, right?
Yes.
That's it, right? There was going to be Spotify. So instead, eventually everyone came around and said, I'm going to figure out how to work with Spotify and get paid for that, right?
Yes.
And that's how it ended up working. And that's how people need to think about this.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you, Kevin, so much for your time. I'm sure listeners love this episode. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, download, share with others so they get value as well. If you have any contacts, you can reach out to any questions. You can reach out to me and Kevin. We're going to share information in the description of this episode. And thank you once again, Kevin. And thank you, everyone, for listening.